Yep, there's ice all around, as far as the eye can see. A white desert covers the entrance to your cave, the one where you and a bunch of other settlers live. Everyone's gathered around a fire pit, trying to keep warm, telling each other stories about how much snow they saw the other day. Some are running around playing tag, throwing sticks, whatever people used to do for fun 300,000 years ago. You're one of the earliest Homo sapiens to ever walk the earth. Others are sleeping or just resting their eyes. All around the cave, all you can hear are stomachs rumbling, sounds like a wild animal lurking around. You look out the mouth of the cave and see that the storm has cleared. Time to grab some tools and head out as a group. In the open wilderness, you find some berries covered in snow and plants that might be edible. But it's not enough to feed the whole tribe. It's the Ice Age, and there's not much vegetation growing anywhere. One of your friends spots some large footprints in the snow. The chase is on. You can't tell what it is, but it should be enough to feed everyone for a couple of days. As you go deeper into the snow-covered forest, you hear a growl behind you. You hope it's your stomach, but you look behind you and suddenly black out. An ice age is a period when large sheets of ice cover everything, changing the Earth permanently. It's partly responsible for the raising and lowering of sea levels, as well as the current layout of the continents. Picture monster-thick ice sheets spread across what's now Canada, Scandinavia, Russia, and even South America. That's all caused sea levels to change drastically, and temperatures around the world fell dramatically. And I'm not talking about just one ice age. There were a bunch of them. Scientists say there have been 5 major ice ages throughout history, lasting for millions of years. And we're in the middle of one right now. Relax, don't panic. It doesn't mean we're all going to be sleeping next to bonfires, trying to keep warm after being out all day looking for woolly mammoths. And no, there won't be a massive geological ice storm that freezes everything in its path. Ice ages have warmer periods in them that come and go, lasting for tens of thousands of years. In fact, billions of years ago, the Earth was one giant snowball with no life on it. And the sun back then was also just a cute little fireball without enough heat to melt all that ice. But as the sun got bigger and hotter, Earth's ice slowly melted away, leaving the green and blue ball we have today. We're living in the Quaternary Ice Age that's been going on for the past 2.6 million years, and counting. Some animals have thrived in this latest ice age, like whales and sharks. They've been at the top of the food chain for ages. Under them are seals, certain kinds of fish, otters, all the way down to tiny plankton. Up on the cold surface, mammals had to grow thick and shaggy fur just to stay warm. Ancient mammoths, rhinos, and bison were known to have thick rugs on them. They looked awesome. They were herbivores and ate small shrubs and whatever grass they could find. But several thousand years ago, temperatures began to rise, and most of these animals became extinct. The ones that remained evolved into the elephants, hippos, and rhinos we have today. You wake up from your blackout and find yourself face to face with a creature that kind of looks like a modern-day bobcat, except it's much bigger and furrier. It's a Smilodon, an epic version of a saber-toothed cat with a mean look. It's around the same size as a male lion and has 2 front fangs that make me think twice before leaving the safety of my cave. They look scary, but scientists think their bite wasn't as powerful as today's tigers or lions. What made them tough were their giant forearms used to wrestle down anyone who got on their nerves. In packs, they were even able to take down mammoths. Either way, you don't want to be waking up next to this kitty. It's staring you down, ready to pounce. But you and your friends keep calm and slowly back off. You get the genius idea to throw a rock to distract it, then run. Nowadays, it's near impossible for a human to outsprint a lion or tiger, but humans back then were much fitter. Once the danger's over, everyone continues to look for food. It's getting dark, and you haven't found anything to bring back to the cave. Suddenly, you smell something burning. Way off in the distance, you see a thin column of smoke rising into the sky. Another settlement? You and your friends look at each other and approach the smoke cautiously. Homo sapiens first came into being about 200 or 300 years ago. But human history didn't just pop up out of nowhere. As far back as 7 million years ago, some of us decided to call it quits. We left our chimpanzee ancestors in the jungle and started doing our own thing. And that didn't just happen once. Over those next millions of years, there were over 20 different human species. Some were our ancestors, some were twigs from a completely different branch. Some were tiny, others better adapted for hot or cold weather. Before you know it, you see a group of Neanderthals cooking some meat, sharpening their tools. Neanderthals were the first to migrate to Europe. Scientists believe they were around somewhere between 40,000 to 400,000 years ago. They occupied all areas between Europe and Asia, while Homo sapiens, that's us, were still all the way down in Africa. You enter their camp and immediately see the differences between each other. They're stocky and look a bit different, but there are some similarities, like flat teeth for chewing and gnawing and big skulls for their big brains. They even have clothes on, like you. According to archaeologists, they lived in shelters and made tools out of stone, sticks, and bones. They welcome you inside and give you a tour like no other. You're officially meeting another human species. They take you inside their cave and show you some of their cave paintings. They were the first artists of their time. Many of their galleries are still around today, like the ones in caves in Spain. You know their style: minimalist paintings of deer, a large handprint. They also dabbled a bit in jewelry making. They made necklaces out of eagle talons and animal fangs. They were also probably the first ones to harness the power of fire. Did they discover it when a bolt of lightning hit a tree? Or when one of them dropped a rock on another rock, creating a spark? No one really knows. But they were able to recreate it and use it to keep warm, to cook food, to see in the darkness, and to protect themselves. After the nice tour, you hang around the campfire to keep warm. They even offer you some extra clothes for the journey home, mostly thick, shaggy mammoth coats. If only you could talk to each other, that would be awesome. But it's getting dark, and you need to head back to the tribe. You say your goodbyes and thank them for teaching you how to draw a deer, and for that sack of food they gave you. The Ice Age was important for the development of the modern Homo sapiens. Because of the extreme cold and other harsh conditions, they had to adapt to survive, be extra clever and innovative. They developed advanced tools and even used bone needles to sew warm clothing. They may have hosted the first ever runway show. When the climate started to get warmer, they developed farming techniques to sustain themselves and mainly settled near large bodies of water like rivers or lakes, while others opted to be near seas and oceans. They, we, were even the first to domesticate animals. Fast forward a few 100,000 years and here we are. So, how would you feel if you accidentally met your relative who lived around 9,000 years ago? It's exactly what happened to Adrian Targett, a retired history teacher from Somerset, England. He noticed a familiar face on the front page of several newspapers. It was the image of the so-called Cheddar Man. Sounds cheesy, right? Anyway, his skeleton was discovered in 1903 in Cheddar Gorge near Somerset. Now that makes sense. Scientists used his DNA as a model to create a portrait of one of the oldest humans found in Britain who lived back in the Mesolithic period. Cheddar Man's initial DNA analysis has shown that he was a typical representative of the Western European hunter-gatherer society. Years later, with the use of new technology, the scientists managed to establish that he had dark brown or black hair, dark skin, and bright blue eyes. In 1997, researchers analyzed genetic material taken from the cavity of one of Cheddar Man's molar teeth and compared it to samples taken from locals whose families were known to have lived in the Cheddar area for centuries. The test found that Mr. Target was, indeed, Cheddar Man's direct descendant. The genes were passed from mother to daughter across 300 generations. The only obvious difference in appearance between the two was skin coloring. As humans migrated north from the harsh African sun many thousands of years ago, their skin got lighter to absorb more sunlight and vitamin D. But this process didn't happen overnight. So the skin of Cheddar Man is much darker than that of his offspring, who was born under the cold British sun. Mr. Target admitted that he didn't know how he felt about the test results. He wasn't surprised, though, as he recognized his nose shape and bright blue eyes in his ancestor's face. His name ended up in the Guinness World Record books as the farthest traced descendant by DNA. Studying Cheddar Man also opened up some new evidence of when and how farming came to the British Isles. Researchers concluded that the hero of the day was a part of an extended group of families of around 30 people. It looks like they came after the woolly mammoth had disappeared, but before farming became a thing in the area. The oldest traceable family tree before Mr. Target's case stretched back 5,200 years, which is older than Rome. The lineage of the Chinese Kang clan spans over 80 generations. It includes more than 2 million people, and one of them is the famous philosopher Confucius himself. And it still holds the title of the most accurate longest family tree. Ever wondered how many ancestors you have? Well, let's do some math here. So first, it's 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents. Yeah, if we keep multiplying by 2 and go back 10 generations, we get 1,204 ancestors. It sounds like quite a crowd, but 10 generations aren't that many when it comes to thousands of years of human history. About 20 generations, or 400 years ago, each of us should have about 1 million ancestors, and 800 years ago, 1 trillion ancestors. In theory, it leaves us with hundreds of trillions of people, which is practically impossible since there have never been that many people on Earth. Imagine there lived a guy around 1,000 years ago. His daughter was your mother's 33rd great-grandmother, and his son was your father's 33rd great-grandfather. It would mean he's on 2 branches of your family tree, both on your mother's and on your father's side. Most people who lived at that time would actually appear on our family trees not just twice, but thousands of times. There were just around 200 million people on Earth back then. It means that each of them would have to appear 5,000 times on the family tree of each of us living today. Life isn't that mathematically even, though. Some people from the past never had children, and others had many of them, which means they'd be featured on the trees of many, many people. Steve Olson, author of the book Mapping Human History, used the help of a statistician, a computer scientist, and a supercomputer to calculate how interconnected the human family tree is. If you went back in time 2,000 to 5,000 years, you'd meet a human who could call everyone currently living their descendant. A journey a bit further in time, say 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, would let everyone living today meet their ancestors, and that would be the same people. This supports the theory that our family trees aren't inverted pyramids that keep endlessly widening, but diamonds. You start from yourself, and as you go back several generations, you see it grow wider. Then, at some point, the tree starts narrowing as it goes down to only a few ancestors and even to one person. This person probably lived a few thousand years ago, during the reign of Tutankhamun, or maybe during the golden age of ancient Greece. They didn't do anything particularly outstanding, and they never knew they would be the ancestor of nearly 8 billion people living on our planet today. So, the next time you visit an exhibition of ancient Egyptian art from the times when pyramids were built, remember that every hieroglyph and every piece of jewelry there was created by one of your great-great-great multiplied by hundreds grandparents. And that mummy in the center of the hall most likely is your ancestor as well. On average, most of us can trace our ancestry with high accuracy back to the 1600s. If you decide to build your family tree, you've got to do some research and learn as much about your ancestors as you can. Start at home and study all papers and photos you can find in the attic or basement. Letters, especially the ones with dates on them, diplomas, report cards, diaries, and postcards are all going to be your best friends in the search. You can also check out the local library or archives. They should have census records that can help you. The results of your search will depend on your ancestors' social status and past wealth. It's always easier to find data on someone wealthy and important to their community. Now, in some cases, birth records might be destroyed or misplaced. Your origins can also affect the search, as many cultures had oral histories and didn't record anything in writing. In Western Europe, they started keeping genealogical records during the 1500s. Before that, family members memorized their whole lineage, and of course, they mostly remembered only the names. Sometimes they'd also remember major events alongside key ancestors. In some cases, in ancient times, genealogy helped find the lawful heir to the throne. Royals and nobles who were candidates for the position would present their genealogical trees, just like you send your CV and recommendation letter now. The U.S. didn't start keeping lineage records until around 1910. Switzerland has records that stretch back over 700 years. China, for comparison, has been doing it for over 2,000 years. Another priceless source of knowledge is your elderly relatives. Each artifact you find and show them will most likely encourage a long and interesting story full of names and details. There are many free websites that will help you organize the information you find. The more users the website has, the more likely you are to find some of your ancestors in someone else's tree. You can also use your findings, especially stories you managed to recover, to write your family history book. Be prepared that this research might take many years. The more ancestors you find, the more you'll still have to discover. In case you prefer biology to paperwork, you can try taking a DNA ancestry test. Scientists will analyze your genetic material to trace the migration paths of your ancient ancestors from 1,000 years ago and will give you some information on your ancestral roots. You won't learn much about who your relatives were, though. Current tests can't go back further than 8 generations. There are many testing services available, and if you choose the ones with a large database, you have more chances of getting a match with other people looking for ancestors. Happy hunting!
Throughout history, humans have used tattoos to protect themselves against sorcery, claim membership in groups, declare their love, honor their loved ones, or simply express themselves. And it looks like tattoos are going nowhere because as of 2022, 46% of the United States population has at least one. That's why it's not shocking that tattooing has taken the 6th spot amongst the fastest growing industries in the country. And it's safe to assume that this percentage will only go up. But have you ever stopped and wondered when this form of body modification came into existence and how it changed over the years? Let me tell you. Tattoos date back thousands of years. Have you ever heard about Otzi the Iceman? He's the 5,200-year-old mummy who was found embedded in glacial ice in 1991 in the Ötztal Alps. Yep, that's how he got the nickname Otzi. The reason I'm talking about him now is that he holds the record for the oldest tattoos in the Guinness World Records. He had 61 markings across his body that are considered to be tattooed by the experts. These markings are composed of vertical and horizontal lines which were created from fireplace ash or soot pigment. Otzi, however, was not trying to express his true self with them. When they examined Otzi's bones in detail, they noticed that there was age or injury-related degeneration on the tattooed areas of his body. This made scientists believe that his tattoos may have been related to discomfort relief treatments similar to acupuncture. That also explains the somewhat random distribution of those markings on his body. Experts also believe the fact Otzi had so many tattoos means that others in his culture knew about tattooing and that he wasn't the first person ever to have tattoos. Although Otzi's tattoos are considered to be therapeutic, evidence of figurative tattoos, which are images of real subjects such as animals and so on, were also discovered on 2 5,000-year-old Egyptian mummies. As well as pushing back evidence of the practice of tattooing in Africa by 1,000 years. This discovery also holds the importance of changing the belief that only Egyptian women got tattoos. However, Other mummies with tattoos have been recovered from at least 49 archaeological sites, including locations in Greenland, Alaska, and the Philippines, which only suggests that tattoos were a worldwide thing. But despite all this evidence that shows the art of tattooing is ancient and universal, the exact date of when and where it began is unknown. There are written records that date tattoos back to 5th century BCE Greece, where they were used to mark criminals and enemies so that it would be easier to identify them if they tried to escape. Romans and Persians also used tattooing for the same purposes. Other cultures, on the other hand, had different uses in mind. In the Philippines, tattoos were symbols of tribal identity, kinship, bravery, beauty, and social or wealth status. They were also believed to have magical abilities and were done as protective talismans against any evil supernatural forces. Consequently, the process of tattooing was believed to be sacred. Therefore, it involved some rituals. For example, if an artist or a person who was about to get a tattoo sneezed before the tattoo began, this was seen as a sign of disapproval by the spirits. So the session would be called off or rescheduled, and once a tattoo was complete, a celebration usually would be held on its behalf. When it came to ancient Egypt, tattoos were originally used to show a dedication to a deity, and they were believed to convey divine protection. What's worth mentioning here is the fact that many of the tattooed mummies discovered in Egypt were female. One of those mummies came to be known as Amunet, the tattooed priestess of Hathor, who had a variety of tattoos on her body. When she was first discovered, experts initially thought that due to the placement of her tattoos, these were either done as a medical treatment for a lower body condition, or they were simply the markings of lower status. But in recent years, a further examination revealed that she was a person with high social status, so the previous theory was debunked. This discovery led some to believe that her tattoos possibly functioned as protection against the difficulties of pregnancy and childbirth. Now let's take a look at Japan's history with tattoos. Tattooing for spiritual and decorative purposes was widespread in Japan, and it actually extended back to at least 300 BCE. Some written texts also describe tattooing and other bodily markings to indicate social differences among Japanese people. By the 17th century, however, most criminals were tattooed as a mark of punishment. And by the mid-19th century, tattoos were banned altogether, and those who had them were viewed as lacking respectability, which in turn created a subculture of outcasts, who formed the roots of the Yakuza. But how did the modern and more expressionist role of tattoos in the Western world begin? James Cook was a British explorer and captain who was famous for his 3 voyages to the South Pacific, which took place between 1768 and 1779. During one of these voyages, he traveled to the Tahitian Islands, where he was introduced to the art of tattooing. When he landed on the island, he was surprised and impressed by the heavily tattooed men and women, and he wanted to make note of them in his logbook. So, to describe their body art, he used the term tattoo after hearing the locals use a word that sounded similar to it regarding their markings. Before that, tattooing was simply referred to as scarring, painting, or staining. Many of Cook's crew returned to England with tattoos from this voyage, which, in return, restarted a tattoo tradition among the sailors. They started using tattoos as a way to record their travels. For example, they would get an anchor tattoo if they crossed the Atlantic Ocean successfully, or a shellback turtle tattoo if they crossed the equator. This paved the way for the traditional style of tattooing. By the 19th century, although tattoos were still largely associated with sailors, they had spread to British high society as well. During the 1870s, they had even become fashion statements among some members of the upper classes, as well as royalty. The people who had them among the high society included British Prime Minister Winston Churchill's mother, Lady Randolph Churchill, Prince of Wales, the future Edward VII, and his sons, as well as several of Queen Victoria's relatives. It was even rumored that she herself had a tattoo of a tiger fighting a python in the area of her body that could easily be covered with clothes, just in case. This all led to tattoos becoming a mark of wealth by the late 1880s. In 1891, the tattoo machine was created by Samuel O'Reilly, who was a New York City tattooer himself. His design was based on a modification of Thomas Edison's electric pen, which was originally designed to help businesses with document duplication. It was also around the same years that tattooed women started to make appearances, though mostly in the circuses to entertain people. Although that industry eventually slowed down, by the 1920s, more women began to get tattoos as a cost-effective alternative to makeup, since products were so expensive at the time. In 1939, Mildred Hull became the first female to open her own tattoo shop in New York. It was around this time that the US introduced Social Security numbers, and many citizens got theirs tattooed on their bodies as a memory aid. However, despite these tattoos, decorative tattoos continued to be looked down upon. If you had a tattoo during the 50s or the 60s, you would still be viewed as a rebel or a criminal by the majority of people. In 1961, the New York City Health Department actually banned tattoos because they saw them as the cause of spreading diseases. The ban was not lifted until 1997. Today, tattoos are so common that even toys have them. So there's no ban, no stigma, no style or color restriction, and nothing to stop you from getting the tattoo of your dreams. Maybe except your mom.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.